Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna go over the slide-in or not here, but I'm gonna take a quick look here. But yeah, I was kind of thinking about all that stuff about Region 0 and Region 1, and Texas, New Mexico power, and how CenterPoint seemed to be a contesting factor of more so the question than actually whether known or not known the fact is probably one way or the other. Yeah, so what would give the perception of 0 is probably exactly the 1, and yeah, so like in communications, it seemed to be the thing about whether or not that's just a network of deed restriction based upon a vice president network, or some idea of the acronym, or some idea like a cost-effective budget cut in the form of like a sole proprietorship in space exploration in search of an umbilical cord somewhere. That's some idea like a bill that's been introduced in legislation, potentially passing along, so like anyway, it seemed to be that the thing of it is that really that programming is obviously some idea that seems to be a factor that has directed at least my awareness anyway, that would seem to have been a question whether or not if a deed restriction is only the thought of a carbon footprint and an absentee voting. The thing about it is that continually seem to be more and more, studying more and more alphanumeric linguistics and certain factors about, vice president network as compared to immigration and custom enforcement. The thing with this is that the way things have been like really going, it's kind of like it's been like chronological, more so since really it's like I wasn't even really, trying to calculate like really anything about, I guess, if you want to call it manufactured options and everything that's been involved. It seemed to be that the availability had only been some idea of a intellectual duration, or, the max, thing about it. But the thing with this is that it seemed to be that ultimately, it had gotten to the birth certificate and a preliminary prejudice product registration of the birth certificate that would give some indication that the thing with it is that the carbon footprint and the absentee voting is not the normal perception of, beyond the front lines of the beachfront, identifying any kind of type of murder law involving networking. The thing with this is that it had presented the thing now. It's kind of like with like a supplemental security income identified like as Sup Treasury 310, and now it's kind of like it's gotten to like the Houston Astros uniform during the Nolan Ryan. He got close. I think it's close to 7,000. And I've said this several times. Okay, my first time I was like thinking of 2,000 when Nolan Ryan was like at his career, but it's like far beyond that. Okay, the thing with this is that I was thinking about Nostradamus and the highest possible score, based upon the narration of Orson Welles, stating that Nostradamus' accuracy was like a 400-year period that had been the latest was at the time, way back in the 80s, predicted, to be like 2012, and then the movie 2012 came out, and all the stuff that was kind of like in coordination with Christianity and the Jehovah's Witnesses, the beginning of the last days in 1914, which is one of the years. I've seen it both years, like 1913 and 1914, for the grand opening of the 12 Federal Reserve Banks, and that seemed to be the deal about the proper English grammatical composition. When you see the P, it's pronounced. When you see the P, it's silent. And the difference between county and country. And the R thing about the thing with this is that that now the subplan 10 seems to be the deal about Astroworld turning into Six Flags, and then moving to San Antonio. And the thing with this is that the area code like San Antonio, okay, it's like 210, okay. And it seemed to be the thing about the 100 Club, okay, in the Houston area, more so supplemental security income of non-taxable income is a thing, because it seemed to be, contesting factors that people having it, and knowing that people that have supplemental security does not have to pay property tax. And the thing with this is that, realizing getting overbilled, repeatedly for like a mobile phone and the CenterPoint Energy, electric bill, which is the only smart meter that I've had, was CenterPoint at the time. and getting overbuilt. Anything on SSI, I mean, it's like, it's not that it's, a mood altering religious experience, but I mean, who are you trying to kid? The thing with this is that, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to like the 100 Club over like an area code of like a San Antonio being 210 and some idea, the 100 Club being 310. The thing with this is that ultimately it gets to, thought of like a San Antonio representing, the Alamo and Santa Ana and Mexico that way. The thing with this is that with CarbonFootPrint and absentee voting and, programming and all that stuff and networking, I mean, it puts into question, what's the deal about the birth certificate, okay? I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the point of, some like huge phenomenon in Texas and Texas New Mexico Power, somewhere in between Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt, in the New Deal Act, okay? There's it seemed to be like an intellectual direction based upon, like immigration customs enforcement representing like, multi-international banking systems, multinational corporations and incorporation and methods of banking. And I've mentioned this before because in the book, it seemed to be the book, okay, because of of a baptism, okay, June 14, 1992, not many days hence, the thing about, an experience about that, okay, and the thing with this is that ultimately, it led to me, like really getting involved with, like, I mean, like, seriously, like, really serious about, finding some kind of explanation in the King James Version Bible, and really, I mean, I really wasn't finding what I was looking for. I mean, you have no idea. Like, you got to be kidding me. When alphanumeric linguistics came into the picture and defining, and looking as like I had the U.S. $1 bill in my wallet, like, virtually my entire life, but at the age of 28 and all this was going on, and I looked at it, it's kind of like what is that symbol in the middle? It's kind of like it ultimately, it got to like, like a telepathic mediation in the sky over, really an experience after, yes, a baptism, okay? The thing with this is that, the deal about the heart God, okay, or escrow. The thing with this is that it seemed to be somewhere in the mind of and it's just as simple as it gets. As ridiculously not at the same time. It's kind of like intellectual property is like having fair use of intellectual property. Is like, I mean, even the Mormon Church using, I mean, the same word as having fair use. I mean, it's like the international phrase. I mean, for real, like of intellectual property, an easement that's used, okay. I mean, as naive as it may be and seem to like so very many, it's kind of like, I mean, it's like, well, like, I guess you said so, it's kind of like, well, I thought you knew, like you've been going to a Mormon church like your whole life. You're just not finding out, like, the Mormon church actually has fair use of the King James Version Bible. And you've been going to church for 20 years, right? And you're just now realizing, right? That's intellectual property. Huh. Yeah, sure. So, like, anyway, so it seemed to be, the big deal about, whether or not if alphanumeric linguistics is even involved. Anyone claim knowing or not knowing seems to be like whether or not if the American, is sixth born Israel, obviously, think about Jesus, okay? So, like, anyway, okay? So, I mean, it's still English anyway, okay? But the thing with this is kind of like, it seemed to be, ultimately, that the Mormon and the American amplified thing about that much about it seemed to be, becoming more and more a mandatory requirement. I mean, if it's going to be the issue, like some idea of like a degree or Christian Science or, a circuit, thoroughly manufactured based upon, manufactured geographic options or even the thought of like manufactured auditing, legal media depositions kind of like ridiculously, I mean, so not cool, to think about some idea of carbon footprint and absentee voting being used as some idea of absentee voting like a non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization is an American Free Trade Act of like, graffiti and confetti based upon, whether anyone maintenances, any idea between, the Bureau of Vital Statistics and a birth certificate, okay? And it's not that it's dormant, just because, I mean, many people might maybe think that automatically, hey, they're an American because they have a birth certificate, but obviously, the assumption that really, I mean, ultimately, it's like it's not even talked about to begin with. Assuming that has often been, proven based upon my experience, it's kind of like, it's still not a word, and knowing, obviously, that not a word about it is obviously, the way it happens. And knowing or not knowing is obviously, everything about like anyone near here, okay? The thing with this is that, okay, it's just that thinking that the Astros, an asteroid turned to, Six Flags and then moved to San Antonio seemed to be the thing about them, Latin America as well as Mexico, and the Gulf of Mexico. And the thing with it is that the Roosevelt New Deal Act and like Texas and New Mexico power put in the Region 1, like in the United States and Canada, and not be a question of like just South America based upon naivety of, like 69 being Texas and Mexico, or an equator issue that seemed to be whether or not if, ultimately, getting, serious about alphanumeric linguistics, obviously the McDonald's Golden Arches is ultimately, even the thing about occupational safety, health administration, and more seem to be, the thing about Jesus said he knew you before the foundations of the earth, and it seemed to be, the big deal. Not going through a circuit or anything not happening. I don't see that like a mandatory requirement. I had no idea or even anticipated. Not one thing about it. But based upon just the baptism for real, like I was like really, and I didn't even stop looking. Okay, the thing with this is that when I got involved with like alphanumerics, okay, it was only alphanumerics and didn't even really think of anything linguistic. Okay, because the thing about alphanumerics is like automatically, it's kind of like for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years at the most. As Kim began, kind of got impressed, kind of got fascinated, and wow, that's not a joke, And I just like really, I guess really for about the 4 or 5 years, it's like almost nonstop. Every chance I got, day and night. Sometimes day and night, and 2 and 3 days and nights, just nonstop. For real. But and then I'd say really probably after about 5 years, I actually thought for the first time, actually thinking about maybe something linguistic. And really, it was only because when I got to the M as in and realized combining the the IS is 5610, and when I got to the 5610 in PaperMate and realized something about my own name, Wade, and Roe v. Wade, and only based upon the spelling of Roe being like ROW 61 like a miracle in news as compared to some people's placement based upon distribution of information and convey the spelling as ROE. It's almost like, really, does Roe v. Wade represent, absentee voting and the carbon footprint, based upon pronunciation as compared to spelling, and what teleprompting is to, available closed captioning for the hearing impaired. The thing with this is that, just like that one thing right there, it become, the issue, and now it seems to be the SuppSecTreas 310 is becoming the factor of like San Antonio, because it seemed to be like when Asteroid moved to San Antonio, became like Fiesta, Texas. The thing with this is that ultimately, if that represents some idea of like a Santa Anta, and remember the Alamo, because it seemed to be the thing of it is that supplemental security income, okay, originating and giving the impression now, it seemed to be, obviously giving the impression that remember the Alamo is about the supplemental security income, and seem to be a point of origin that's not really discussed, presented as Austin, okay, and still is, but the thing with this is that continually it seemed to be like having any kind of contesting factor between Wells Fargo and like Regions Bank, somewhere between Wells Fargo presenting, clear access banking, and throwing it, at the public like it's available, as far as like a type of an account that suggests that it's not a checking account. And then the prepaid now card for like Regions does the same thing, okay? The thing with this is like, and all this stuff about American Express with the 15-digit is being presented like a 15-digit with like a Regions Bank as a prepaid now card. Yet at the same time, it's kind of like, who you kidding for real, because the thing with this is that continually, it's kind of like just here, I just like moved to Bank of America and had a federal direct deposit, form from the bank, took it to Social Security Administration and getting direct deposits, and some idea of like, hey, there's an investigation. Is it really? Investment and the idea of like custom enforcement agents just like walking in and out of my home, just because I was like, everywhere around me deciding like, what does it mean to be an American, it's kind of like, and, well, how many languages do you speak? Really, don't you really already know, I mean, who are you trying to kid? I mean, for real, okay? In any case, okay, so like, the thing with this, it seems to be really about a birth year. The thing with this is that, all the grayscale of like the Houston Astros uniform seems to be a factor of like 56:10. And likewise, even the Samsung refrigerator that's like with Aaron's leasing, it presents, the thing about that, it's really 28.2. But the thing of it is that it presents the alphanumeric 6, which is a big deal between like, Six Flags, as a matter of fact, or, from ABC, 13 Houston to ABC 7 Los Angeles, the difference of 6, and between Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt, it's like 6 presidential terms in office, and like the difference between J and D and J.D. Powers, it's like 6, and a whole bunch of stuff about the alphanumeric 6, okay? It seemed to be like, the presidential thing about it. And this is like the next 6 presidential term in office, okay? The thing is that, it's not calculated the same way for like really any of, but I think there's only 4 ways to calculate it. But ultimately, it's like, doing it so many times that ultimately it became recognized as, there's only like 4. What duration it means alphanumerically and numerically in alphanumeric 6. It seemed to be, the presidential thing about, the number 6. But anyway, in any case, so like, you got to that, so like, now it seemed to be the thing about, the Sup 310, Sup Treasury, and Supplemental Security, Treasury 310. Now it seemed to be the idea of like a San Antonio being presented as the Alamo, and SanAntonio. You got to be kidding me, man. So I mean, if ultimately, if that's the carbon footprint, as some idea of like whether it's a known or not known fact, between some idea of like whether or not the citizenship birthrights is only a question of like a preliminary prejudice, a product registration of a birth certificate. I mean, ultimately, it seemed to be whether or not if I mean, is that really the factor? Whether it's a known or not known fact. I mean, if it's going to be continually, a contesting factor over a deed restriction based upon, television programming, or some idea of like it's a national security issue. Just turn television on. I mean, a national security. Which one? The gross national products, or the monetary and domestic. I mean, ultimately, it's getting to the commercial venue, living quarters. What do you mean? So, what does that mean to a neighborhood that they have a K television and W radio and W radio and W television and K television, K radio? I mean, it's ultimately, the deed restriction, the deal about K and W television that way, because it seemed to be the only thing about gross national product is involving advertisement that seemed to be kind of above, programming itself on K and W television, and has its own, a network of like, information, other than, K and television, K radio, and W television. But anyway, it seemed to be the thing about supplemental, 310. Now it seemed to be the San Antonio thing based upon the 100 Club, ultimately being, some idea of like code blue. Is it really a code blue? Yet San Antonio presents, think about, I mean, it's not, neglect based upon lack of experience or LULAC. See, the thing about LULAC, okay? I mean, get real for real, okay? Latin Urban League, okay? I mean, ultimately, I mean, if that's the only thing about absentee voting and carbon footprint as some kind of safeguard, okay? Or some marginal spread, and sort of, a pivot point between a 90-degree right angle of like international financial management using some idea of San Antonio, likewise, or even a smart meter, because it seems to me that San Antonio has only presented now some idea of some connectivity between like LULAC and, whether or not if networking is only the VPN of a vice president network. That way, you hear all that stuff about back in the 80s, because you're something special at Monterey House, huh? Really? I mean, is it really Monterey, or is it some idea like a patent pending based upon intellectual? So I mean, is San Antonio being used for supplemental security as an escrow account based upon only a neighborhood? I mean, if it's only the issue of television program dictating whether or not if a congressional act is the yay or nay defining the meaning potentially even of what commerce dictates what's on or offshore. of whether or not it's a boycott or embargo or a method of holding of some like idea of like whether or not if real estate is only a neighborhood or whether it's appreciation or depreciation based upon programming on television? Or is it the thought that maybe professional witnessing is only manufactured what only auditing might mean is an option? Is it really an option? In any case, so like it seems to be, getting to the point now of whether, well, hey, like, you mean you were born in 1964 and you're not a drummer in a pawn shop? You hadn't been to the pawn shop? And you're not a drummer? Yeah, so I mean, like all that 240% seemed to be like, you're kidding me. I mean, it's not warehouse music, okay? It seemed to be like really even the home theater presents like, so what's really going on with like, electronics with like, podcasts, like what's really going on? Like when, who's not looking? Who's not listening? Oh, really? I mean, is that what's going on? Like, really? I mean, I don't know if that would be, the difference between what's in or out of circuit or, like, hey, it's the in-law, it's got, maybe there's an in-law identity crisis, right? So, like, I mean, if that's like the North American Free Trade Act based upon like a product registration, I mean, so like, is that a claim as a patent pending or loss prevention? I mean, is ultimately loss prevention the only thought of like having fair use as intellectual property? The no being legal tender for all debt? Is it really? Or is it like the Adonai thing, the Mormon thing about it's a debit? Well, I mean, like, can't you make your mind up? I mean, so if it's ultimately getting to appreciation or depreciation, I mean, so like, what is it like to be like a commercial venue, like the branch of a commercial venue and of living quarters, and like, someone like, hey, you used to like you went to a concert, didn't you? You bought a compact disc and music video, didn't you? Didn't you? That's what it is. Isn't it? Isn't it? That's what it is. Isn't it? Yeah. So like there's Christian Science involved with it, right? Yeah. Why one pronouns, 4 types of pronouns cannot be used as a subject. I mean, it's almost like RPM on Highway 288. I mean, what is that? Is that like the black stuff on Highway 288? The RPM, the 33, 45, and 78 RPM. And then there's like Pro Bass. I've seen it both ways, Pro Bass and Bass Pro. And ultimately it's getting to the electronic schematic fish representing, the delta force as a schematic triangle in the electronics. Okay? And the pi r squared and McDonald's golden arches being like side by side and both half cycles above the equator and oscillation likewise in addition. And the thought about, ultimately getting to, the side by side practical application of principle applied to the half cycle above and half cycle below that would normally be in chronological, but together almost like the inequality thing about, the electronic schematic fish that represents the thing about Christianity and the fish and the misappropriation and allocation of the Mississippi that way. But it seems to be the thing about it is that ultimately it's kind of like a carbon footprint and absentee voting has ultimately got now, it seems to be the non-taxable income issue between like, like, well, what is SanAntonio, controlling some idea of like Santa Ana between, like, what is that? What is it? It's like SanAntonio, like a huge escrow account of like some idea of like placement as some idea of whether it's escrow or some idea of savings on behalf of like the who knows anyway form and programming. So I mean, so like, what does that mean at the Alamo? Like, like Davy Crockett and Betty Crocker and yeah. And that peninsula and like the Musketeers like serve milk or cookies in Alamo over whether or not if a supplemental 310s like the Houston Police Department Code Blue and Hawaii 50, and some idea of like you got your Code Blue going on, So like 100 Club is like is throwing all that like are you sure you're blue? And now it seems to be the thing about the black and blue thing, huh? But in any case, it's kind of like so like I mean if that's ultimately some idea of like escrow being presented as a carbon footprint, that would only dictate normally what would be involved with real estate, normally of neighborhoods, not always of degrees, or some idea of like what who knows anyway for them. And so if that's ultimately presenting the thought of like Latin Urban League using any other language other than English, giving the impression of what it means to be like like in Pearland, Texas, in alphanumerics, or it's kind of like, hey, yeah, how long have you known you speak English, man? I mean, hadn't you been speaking English for like 10, 15, 20 years, and you're just now like realizing you didn't need to know it? Or is it the who knows anyway form, right? So like anyway, so that's like what's going on, okay? I mean, if it's not, what it needs to be, because you're not changing my mind about it now, right? I mean, if it's not going on, hey man, well, it's going to be going on anyway, isn't it? So in any case, so like it's going to be that. So like I was thinking about a supplemental 310. So what is the deal about the 310 and 210 San Antonio area code? I mean, is that like the Ulysses S. Grant and escrow? So what is it about San Antonio and Ulysses S. Grant and some idea of the 100 Club? I mean, would that be the Republican as compared to Democratic? Ratifying, codifying, and or would that be the essential difference between some idea of like a appreciation in the form of a de facto? I mean, if it's only the issue between whether or not if duration only presents an easement, only having fair use would. I mean, so like San Antonio, like a de facto like escrow account, based upon. I mean, is that like a protected like embryo that like suggested? Well, it's not a boycott and embargo being held as a method of banking. Well, then like really, what is it? I mean, does it represent Mexico in the way of Alpha America 69 and Latin Urban League that way? Of a VPN as an option between Vice President Network, Immigration Custom Enforcement, as compared to a virtual personal network? I mean, or including, and, I mean, is it the who knows anyway, whatever it needs to mean, or what? So in any case, okay. So, like, the thing with this is that really, ultimately, it gets to whether or not if, some idea of probate is some, idiots that seem to think that whether or not if, some idea of product registration is the only issue as meaning and value. I mean, if it's really only the idea of like I believe some of the diction based upon opportunity has presented well how did you get all that? What do you mean? I mean, is that like a classified ad? It's defined as like K television normally doesn't identify it itself as like complete absolute like criminology, okay? Um, unless some advertisement I said we interrupt our regularly scheduled programming so we might make you realize and maybe come to the conscious awareness that you've been watching a Vice President network your entire life and really probably haven't known it, right? So like what's the deal about the presidential network? I mean, does that mean that only using some idea of like an easement involving like a supplemental 310 is like the idea of like escrow based upon whether it's on or offshore, whether it's taxable or non-taxable, as clearance as a tariff, or some idea of garnishment that would only reflect whether or not if a defaulted principle of like pool would only be the method of holding as a bird bath, right? Because it ultimately gets to the bird perching, okay? And ultimately, a bird perching, and it ultimately gets to, a purge. And think about it, even a purge is involving a baptism, okay? And then he goes on to from the purge to the perjury. I mean, I've heard it. I mean, a bird bath, a baptism. Can you believe it? A bird perching, and then the word purge, like a bird bath. I mean, a baptism, and the secrets of the temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, and the psychic warrior, America's foremost psychic spy, and the cover up, yeah, of the top secret CIA Stargate program, yeah, like a baptism. It's a cover up, yeah. So like all of that, it's ultimately led to some idea like um, yeah, yeah. It's led to a bird bath, okay, somewhere between perching and in purging, and some bird bath into baptism, and the psychic warrior, America's foremost psychic spy, and the cover-up of a bird bath baptism. And the book cover, yeah. And the cover-up a top-secret bird bath baptism. And the CIA Stargate program, yeah. Yeah, for real, is really what it is, yeah. Yeah, really it is, isn't it? My name is Wade, it's like 33, okay, like bird name, MGM, and, it's like really not that, like, I willingly, having anything to do with MGM anyway. Although it seemed to be the Zodiac thing about the lion, yeah. Yeah. Somewhere in, like, constitutional law, it seemed to be whether or not if, auditing legal meeting depositions, the only thought of a writ of habeas corpus producing the evidence, enforcing some idea of, like, experiencing, the thought of, like, what is it about Paroline? What is it about a writ of habeas corpus producing the evidence? I mean, is it only manufacturing, auditing, legal meeting, deposition in a way of what? Management? Or is it like monopolizing capitalization in the form of, like, only whether or not if what's on or offshore is only dictating, maybe only being itemized as human capital going through a circuit, and ultimately Geneva, Switzerland to, seem to be the being venue. Ultimately, it's like gotten to some, linguistics about, being venue being some idea of like univision and Latin terminology that seems to be originating below the equator. And, the secrets of temple how the Federal Reserve runs the country. Because ultimately, even the thing about the name Paul Walker in the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, has ultimately got to, I had a tough time believing really anything about it, the name, although, the initials are PV. And it seemed to be, I mean, ultimately, it's getting to a podcast. Like, what's really going on with the key? You got the key, what you hear, voices, I got the key, voices, I hear voices. Do you really? Is that like, while I'm not looking? You do you really? Wow, it's like, where's it coming from? I mean, are you hearing it now? Having a hearing, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure, yeah. So, like, it's going on, man. It's like, got the Texas Rangers going on, yeah. Yeah, so, like, there's, like, California Angels involved with, like, Blue Angels and California Angels. I mean, there's like a halo involved, okay? Beyond my halo schematic ass on the toilet, right? So, there's an angel on the toilet. It's got some halo, huh? Yeah, sure. So, like, yeah, sacred words call upon you, wise one. Go to the rising canyon where many moons lie, and you'll find a sign. Yeah, a sign, yeah. Then go to the running waters. Yeah, the running waters, and you'll find peace. Yeah, yeah, sure you will. Yeah. Like Abraham Lincoln, night vision, like shadow government, Stargate program. You'll find peace in a black hole space exploration. Yeah. New Bags Highway, yeah, you got it going on, yeah. I waited my whole night to be polite, yeah. Yeah, highlighting characterized by motivation, yeah. I waited my whole life to be polite, yeah. So, like, anyway, so, like, it seemed to be SanAntonio, seemed to be the thing about, well, so what does Santa Ana mean to the Alamo? I mean, if Supplemental Security 310 is the only thought of, like, Code Blue and the 100 Club and Vantage Love 30. What is that? Vantage Love 30 and SanAntonio with Santa Ana and the Alamo and, like Davy Crockett and Betty Crocker and Betsy Ross and, like, God, you kidding me? And Annette Penicillo and the Mouseketeers serving milk and cookies in the Alamo? You kidding me, man? While ratifying and codifying what constitutional law? Are you kidding me? For television program? Are you kidding me? Yeah. Or is that like an endorsement? That's like some idea, like a placement test on a CarbonFootPrint. I mean, it had never been defined that an endorsement involving a method of banking as checking account would be some idea of maybe an American Free Trade Act or some idea of like constitutional law having a right to assemble and freedom of the press is like teleprompting and, you know, not necessarily a breach of copyright or an infringement based upon, you know, having fair use of, like, managing factors, right? So, like, somewhere, like, in between Supplemental 310, there's, like, a code blue from San Antonio to, like, you know, hey, man, like, where's Santa Ana at, man? So, like, you know, it's kind of like, well, you know, hey, don't forget Lee Iacocca's acceptance speech of the century at Plymouth Rock. Yeah, so, like, somewhere between Lee Iacocca and, like, Santa Ana, you know, there's, like, some idea of, you know, the Delta Force and you know, like, pi r squared of a electronic schematic, you know, triangle representing the Delta and a 6-point star and, like, the Star of David. And now it seemed to be the thing about OSHA, Occupational Safety Health Administration, and the N, the thing about the N, the ocean, and, you know, that pronunciation. You probably heard it before, that song, and Clyde say, yeah, 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 yeah. And there he saw Fatima laying on a zebra skin rug, with rings on her fingers and bells on her toes and a bone in her nose, ho thing. And, you know, it's represented that Clyde's like a camel, but, I mean, or is it the Clydesdale? You know, see, the thing about the horseshoe is that it presents, you know, the 8 ohms that has a symbolic representation that looks like a horseshoe, okay? And the thing about that one particular song, they throw off Clyde as a camel, but it's really, you know, the Clydesdale of, like, you know, Anheuser-Busch, huh? Somewhere in between, you know, like Chase and, like, OPEC and oil, you know, there's, like, you know, the idea of, like, Wyatt Earp and John Lennon, the exclusionary rule provision, the Earp thing about, you know, the exclusionary rule provision that presents the alphanumerics of 39 behind, you know, the alphanumerics of 24 of, like, HOA, Homeowners Association, and GMAC being, you know, General Motors Acceptance Corporation being 24, and the IEEE, International Electronic Engineering, and the big O thing about it being 39, and, like, urban, the exclusionary rule provision, where normally a plenipotentiary is more so associated with the thing about, you know, executive power, sovereign immunities, and governmental amnesties. And the thing about it is it seems to be, like, itemizing some idea of, like, human capital based upon, you know, some idea of human civil rights. It seems to be ultimately that Geneva, Switzerland, in the BNV, how true it is, whether or not if human civil rights is the only thought of, like, what human capital is being identified as at least itemized going through a circuit, as some idea of, like, international monetary funding, identifying, you know, some idea of, like, a very, you know, alphanumeric linguistic deal about, you know, going through the circuit, whether it's a known or not known fact. And believe me, more and more, it's been, you know, like, you know, as obvious as it seems now, how everything has happened. You know, identifying, you know, aggregates between, like, monetary domestic gross national product, or some idea in between, you know, some idea that seems to be, you know, whether or not the carbon footprint and the absentee voting is only the idea of whether if defining the meaning of supplemental security, you know, treasury is 310, and some idea of, like, Vantage Love 30 being, you know, alphanumerically 100, when it's spelled out THIRTY. I mean, Vantage Love is like secret de facto. I mean, ultimately, if it defines the meaning of de facto as the entire issue of supplemental security 310, identifying the 100 Club, and Vantage Love 30, that way at the 100 Club, somewhere between LULAC and Latin Urban League, and some idea of the equator, identifying secret de facto, the same as, like, Vantage Love, being, you know, 70 and 54, 30, okay? So, I mean, if all that is led to, you know, like the New Deal about, you know, secret de facto being Vantage Love 30, and, you know, the 100 Club, secret de facto as, like, you know, the 100 Club, you know, Vantage Love, you know, 100 Club is ultimately what, you know, Supplemental 310 look for, you know, the Department of Treasury, as well as, you know, well, so what does that mean to, like, birthrights, citizenship of birthrights, you know? I mean, if, like, that's being, like, a secret de facto, I mean, does it mean that real estate is only, you know, the difference between appreciation or depreciation, or being on YouTube is like legal media and deposition? It's not a manufactured option as a method of, an option of auditing? Or is it really, or is that the EA Sports thing about, like, YouTube? I mean, is it presenting the issue? I mean, is it ultimately getting to, like, Geneva, Switzerland, and ultimately, you know, I'm continually referring to the being venue and certain information. I mean, you know, all the way through my thoughts of, like, we international, like virtually everything I'm seeing on YouTube has become the experience. I mean, it's beyond, seriously not funny. Thinking that, any direction, it's kind of like you got to be seriously not joking, right? So, I mean, ultimately everything I'm looking at, like on YouTube, me being on my own channel, at WadeASV, Pretty P-R-I-D-D-Y, YouTube.com, and thinking that using it for, like, legal media and deposition is not really the idea of, like, auditing, um, manufacturing auditing. I just lost my little battery powered. I'll have to charge it up again. I have another one, but I'm not going to mess with it right now. But the thing is that really, I mean, if SanAntonio is only dictating whether or not, if Austin being presenting, the issue as some idea of like a carbon footprint and absentee voting, but Austin is like relieving itself from, the acronym of like a vice president network in the form of a virtual personal network as some idea of like a secret de facto. Are you kidding me? A vice president network. Throwing it off on like anything other than himself. I mean, in a whole entire continent. Are you kidding me? So, like in any case, and the thing with this is that the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi and the international superstar and supplemental security and all that information that gets to, somewhere in between the HMO and the PPO is ultimately, getting to the thought of the HM being like like 21, and UO, the Iowa, and the UO and IO of like the HMO, the UO and the Iowa, the PPO and the PPI, the IO between the PPI, the Mississippi, and the PPO, the HMO being the UO and the IO of like the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi. Because, the thing about term life and whole life, the HMO and the PPO presents itself in a way that's not led to believe to be integratable or alphanumeric. I don't. I'll actually have to do a little bit of thinking about the HMO and the PPO, but definitely, based upon any idea of like annuity being used in insurance that way, as compared to settlement, it seemed to be the deal between what de facto is and is not. Because when I was studying, de facto predominantly with the United States Supreme Court Southwest Court Reporter, I mean, I specifically, directed all my time on that one word. And I read so many cases in the United States Supreme Court Southwest Court Reporter that, more and more it got that General Motors had covered almost virtually every situation. And it got to the point that reading any other, case other than, General Motors, it got to the point, I mean, well, why read anything else? Because General Motors is covering virtually everything in a whole different way. It would have to be the approach to thinking of something that would be, naive to the fact, of available information and, knowing it and looking at it, even talking about it and not realizing, a different perspective. And that's so the way it is sometimes with like alphanumeric linguistics. But it got to that point because it covered it because, like General Motors, I mean, it presents the easement. It presents the intellectual. It presents the product registration. It presents the amphibious thing about, beyond maritime law, yet the American Idol at the same time of like aviation and aeronautics and space exploration as compared to, the thought of like maritime law, being the thought of maybe potentially, on or offshore and, below sea level and below the operator is the deal about it. And the thing with this is that making a grade beyond internet protocol, local area network seems to be, more and more about whether or not if American Amplified is really presenting the issue of Paul Walker and his initial being PV. I mean, PV speakers, I mean, is known as like a cabinet speaker. Because, when I read the name Paul Walker, I mean, I did a little bit of homework, and I wasn't quite accepting it automatically. Because, the thing of it is that I remember William Jefferson Clinton. And when he really starts talking about, what he's really about in politics, I mean, I really listen to him. I mean, when he really gets into, what he's about, I mean, yeah, so like, I mean, I know that much, when he really starts talking, I mean, I listen anyway, but the thing with this is that, I knew that much about it, and him just saying that thing about, he is so appalled, and I looked at it like in virtually every possible way, including the book, Six of the Temples, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, because, like, he's known for, like, the saxophone anyway, and my thoughts about, a little bit about Sarbanes-Oxley financial instruments that way, and SOX compliance, okay? And the thing with it is that, me being a drummer, and the way I hear things sometimes, just driving around, kind of woke me up a little bit about that, and seeing certain things about, even, that has ultimately got to the thought of, like, the American Express and the Bluebird card representing some idea of, like, a in circuit as compared to, the Airbus. Go to I didn't call it anything about a Stargate program. It was really truthfully after the fact, and realizing something about memory, minus the fact of being 35. I mean, that's when I really, really started calling it, like a Abraham Lincoln night vision. Of course, I knew that about Abraham Lincoln. I was thinking about Abraham Lincoln and thinking that, I'm like looking at a whole bunch of black dots on the map, going through the circuit and hearing all the accents of, like, different languages, all in English, but hearing all the accents going through it, and it got to some point to where I felt like, I was being let it be made known, and I was aware of that I got the impression by quite a few people, like, just like presenting that accent to me that way in English, while going through, like, several, okay, so, like, I really, like, paid attention to that. But anyway, yeah, so, like, in any case, so, like, when I was really thinking about quite a bit about that, and the thing about the all the information in Secrets of the Temple, and how it was, like, really all happening, and listening to world news, and at the time seemed to be thinking about, a Robert E. Rubin. While I had the book, I knew that really after baptism, okay, I was, like, really starting to, like, study, like, a lot of information, more so the King James Version Bible, and the U.S. $1. And when I realized something about, the word transfiguration in the book of Thessalonians, being the alphanumerics of 192, or, a pentagon drummer, a telepathic drummer, or a telepathic pentagon, and all the alphanumerics that way, or and the word transfiguration is the whole entire point on Mount Osri entering heaven thing, okay? Or, and now it's kind of like, the thing about, four purple mountains matches above the fruited plains, representing the plateau. Even the Permian Basin that way seems to be the deal about the location, like Fort Stockton, and sector in Ector County. And I'd mentioned, here's the thing, is that I'd mentioned, the sector Hellraiser electric guitar. And the only thing about networking is really the only reason is because I'd actually went and looked for, like, what I'm going to get, like, the next one. Okay, I'm a drummer, okay. And what you see me on my channel at Wade ASV, Pretty PRDDY at YouTube.com is me, like, on a total, including hardware's special effects and, like, percussion and drums and cymbals and all that's, like, 35 pieces. That's normally what I get, like, all the time. Well, anyway, so, like, I've had, like, maybe 7 or 8 drum sets, and Pearl Vision seems to be, really the best one that I've had, Pearl Vision, VSX, and what you see me on my YouTube.com channel at Wade ASV, Pretty PRDDY at YouTube.com is a Pearl Vision VSX with a Strata Red. And it's 35 pieces with all the cymbals. And they're all, like, just an A custom, and the crashes are, the FX, that's EFX, and those are probably the best sounding crash cymbals that I've had, of Zildjian. And really I prefer Zildjian, but I'm going to paste the Color Sound 900. And really it's really because of, an experience, not long ago, but really after I got on YouTube.com and beginning in the year 2020, okay? I mean, I've been, really practicing my drum, like, all the time in my home anyway. And if I'm not, like, able to use my drums, I mean, I'm always, like, twirling my sticks, going through the motions, I mean, all the time anyway. I really never stopped doing it, really. And the thing with this is that really, ultimately, it's got kind of really frustrating about getting to my original music. I mean, really beyond frustrating, okay? About the way things have really been. And in any case, the thing with this is that, thinking about, everything that's been involved, because the thing with this is that I'm getting, the Pearl Vision VSX and the Strata Blue. I'm working on it, and the thing with this is that when I was referring to a sector Hellraiser electric guitar, it's because the Pecos, the Fort Stockton, Texas area where the James Lanall unit is, the Alpha American 200, okay? In Pecos and Ector and Sector, the pronunciation Ector County, and Pecos and all the counties around that area. It got to, line 6, V series. My thing about Seventh Heaven and the electric guitar combo amp in line 6, V series. And what line 6 is to, the transition from the 6th string to the 7th string. And it seemed to be the thing about, Sector and Ector County, and the thing about Emirates Airlines and Boeing and Guitar Airlines. And it seemed to be the transition. But it just seemed to be, just geographically, the Sector, Ector, and the pronunciation of Ector and Sector and the guitar thing. And the thing it is that line 6 seems to be the thing about the V series, and as well as, the 22nd letter and the FDIC thing about, loss prevention or protecting a U.S. patent. And the thing about, Seventh Heaven and Sector and Ector and Sector guitar. And I would refer to, based upon, it was only because of networking that like the Sector Hellraiser with the, oh God. Anyway, it's the battery-powered effects of, like, the pickups. I'll have to think about it, but anyway, that was available, and because of networking. But the thing is that really my thing is really the Ibanez 6th string and 7th string, and it's the S series, the Ibanez S 670, and I think the 7th string is 770. I'm not sure if they're both QM, but that will probably be the next guitar, as well as some more synthesizers and power amps and recording equipment. Yeah, so like all this has been going on like a minute soon, and really not funny crap about, even being it to begin with, but so I'm going to be getting some more equipment pretty soon anyway. And I'm working on completing, getting my pasty color sound samples really because of the plateau. The thing about Permian Basin and Fort Stockton, it seemed to be presenting the issue of the plateau as well as the birth certificate. And the thing of it is that really, the Permian Basin in Fort Stockton area, like right there at the James Lanall unit, it's like on a Saturday morning, okay, an identical twin rainbow. Anyone who would have seen it would have said, hey, that's the one and only in an entire lifetime. Yeah, and most definitely, the one, but, in any case, so like, on the direct, exact opposite sides of the plateau, and I was doing all the studying. I was hearing Robert E. Rubin, okay, the United States Secretary of Treasury. He was like so on television, and based upon my experience, what's going on in world news, I've kind of like discovered, all the information going on with like world news and certain places that I'd been had been a factor of, what was on television, where was I, when was that, and everything around, what was involved, and it actually seemed to be the thing about the test at the International Electrical Electronic Engineering's apprenticeship, of an electrical apprenticeship off of Covern by Hobby Airport in Houston, Texas, as compared to the information at the time, the Covert mission, and the Covern, it seemed to be a difference of 6, based upon the T and N between Covern and Covert, but I went there and I was going to take the test just to do it. That was back in the 80s. And I went there twice to do it, okay? But that test was like so far beyond, even journeyman, involving sequencing. And, I'd mentioned it before, it was like far beyond. So like I just sit there and wait until it was time to leave. I put my name on, it's like, oh God. Yeah, it's like really, really serious stuff. But anyway, so like that's one thing I remembered about it, okay? I don't think anyone at any apprenticeship, I don't think even journeyman could probably answer like most that were even on a test, because journeyman normally is pretty close to right at a bachelor degree in curriculum and academic, and no matter what unit it is, because normally it's like around 4 years anyway, concentrated in direction, that way. But anyway, so like but what was on that test was like, really, it seemed to be masters, and without the where and when of, well, I guess you had to be there, and the experience about it. Because, sometimes beyond the classroom, beyond the academics, even graduation, further experience, and it doesn't. Sometimes it's not even covered in the classroom. It's only because of the wear and wind that the experience goes really beyond, what is taught in the classroom, even with the degree, So like but anyway, yeah. So like but anyway, I was wanting to kill it because I was thinking about the. I want to get back on track here real quick because it's going on like 55 minutes about the supplemental security 310 and Vantage Low 30 seem to be now that Santa Ana, remember the Alamo, So yeah, so like I was kind of like thinking about that. So like what's going on with the CarbonFootPrint, and now seems to be the secret de facto whether or not if real estate or commercial venue living quarters is only the American amplified issue, or like Pearland, Texas being an issue like well, I mean, it's